The smoke still rose from the ruins of the Great Palace when Captain Jake Morrison led his team through the broken gates. 3 days had passed since the human fleet struck the Zephyrian capital world, and the smell of burned metal and stone filled the air. His boots crunched on shattered crystal as he moved through what had once been the most powerful throne room in 3 star systems. "Keep your eyes open for anything useful," Morrison called to his 5-man salvage team. "Command wants every piece of their technology we can carry back to Earth." The palace had been magnificent before the bombing. Now twisted metal beams jutted from collapsed walls like broken bones. Pieces of what looked like living crystal still glowed faintly among the rubble, casting strange shadows in the dim light filtering through holes in the ceiling. Sergeant Pete Collins kicked at a chunk of debris. "Hard to believe these lizards ruled half the galaxy from this place." "They're not lizards," Dr. Lisa Carter corrected as she scanned the area with her handheld device. "The Zephyrians are actually closer to mammals than reptiles. Their skin just looks different because of the way light reflects off it." Morrison nodded toward a partially collapsed doorway marked with strange symbols. "That way leads to the Royal Wing. Intel says that's where they kept their most advanced tech." The team moved carefully through the wreckage. Every few steps, Carter would stop to examine something interesting or collect samples. The Zephyrians had built their palace using materials that human science barely understood. Even broken, some of the structures seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Sir," called Private Danny Kim from up ahead, "you need to see this." Morrison hurried forward to where Kim stood at the edge of what had been a grand chamber. The ceiling had partially collapsed, creating a natural cave of twisted metal and stone. But it was what lay beneath the debris that made Morrison stop and stare. 2 figures lay trapped under a fallen beam that glowed with soft blue light. At first glance they looked human, but their skin had a strange shimmer to it like oil on water. Both wore elaborate robes that had once been white but were now stained with dust and what looked like silver blood. "Are they alive?" Morrison asked. Carter was already moving toward them with her medical scanner. "Barely. Their life signs are weak but stable." "Jake, these aren't ordinary Zephyrians. Look at the neural implants." Morrison moved closer and saw what she meant. Both figures had complex devices attached to their heads, far more intricate than anything they had seen on captured soldiers. The implants seemed to be made of the same living crystal that had been used throughout the palace. "Can we move them?" "The beam is too heavy for us to lift manually," said Collins. "But if we use the portable lifters from the ship, we might be able to get them out." Morrison studied the trapped figures. Something about their faces seemed different from other Zephyrians they had encountered. Less harsh, more refined. Their features were almost elegant in a way that reminded him of classical human statues. "Do it," he decided. "Get the lifters." It took 20 minutes to carefully extract the 2 figures from the rubble. As soon as they were free, Carter began working to stabilize their condition. The silver blood that leaked from their wounds glowed faintly in the dim light. "Their physiology is fascinating," Carter murmured as she worked. "Similar to humans in many ways, but there are differences I've never seen before. The bone density is much higher, and their nervous system appears to be partially integrated with some kind of bioelectric network." One of the figures stirred, and Morrison instinctively reached for his weapon. But the movement was weak, and when the being opened its eyes, there was no threat in them. Instead, Morrison saw something that surprised him: fear and confusion. The figure tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound that might have been words in their own language. Then, to Morrison's amazement, it switched to broken but understandable English. Who are you?" "We're humans," Morrison said carefully. "We found you trapped in the ruins." The second figure was also awakening now. Both struggled to sit up despite Carter's attempts to keep them lying down. They looked at each other with an expression Morrison couldn't quite read, then back at the humans surrounding them. "Humans," the first one repeated, as if tasting the word. "The destroyers of our world." "We didn't destroy your world," Morrison said. "We ended a war that your empire started." The two figures exchanged another look, and this time Morrison caught something like bitter amusement in their expressions. The second one spoke, her voice slightly different but also in English. "Our empire," she said with clear disgust. "Yes, we know what our people have done, what our father commanded." "Your father?" "Emperor Valdris," the first figure said. "Or rather, the late Emperor Valdris. I am Lyra, and this is my twin sister Nova. We were the Imperial Princesses." Morrison felt his team tense behind him. Capturing members of the royal family had not been part of their mission, but it could be incredibly valuable for Earth Command. These two might have information that could help end the war completely. "Where's the rest of your family?" he asked. "Where are your guards, your servants?" Lyra and Nova looked at each other again, and this time Morrison clearly saw pain in their faces. Nova spoke first. "Gone. They left us here when your ships appeared in orbit. Father declared us traitors months ago for opposing his war against your people. When the palace began to fall, no one came to help us. They left you to die?" "Death would have been kinder than the shame of being captured," Lyra said. "In their eyes, we are no longer Zephyrian, we are nothing." Morrison studied the two princesses. Everything about their situation seemed wrong. He had expected to find Zephyrian royalty surrounded by guards and luxury, not abandoned and left to die in the ruins of their own home. "Can you walk?" Carter shook her head. "They need medical attention. Several broken bones, internal injuries, and they're severely dehydrated." Morrison made his decision. "We take them back to the ship. Collins, help the doctor get them stable for transport. Kim, contact the Defiant and tell them we're coming back with wounded." "Sir," Collins said carefully, "are we taking them as prisoners or patients?" Morrison looked at the two alien princesses, abandoned by their own people and left to die in the ruins of their father's empire. Something in their eyes reminded him of refugees he had seen on human worlds. People who had lost everything and had nowhere left to turn. "Patience," he said finally. "At least for now." The medical bay aboard the Defiant hummed with quiet activity as Dr. Carter worked to heal the alien princesses. It had been 3 days since Morrison brought them aboard, and the crew was still adjusting to having former enemies as patients. The twins lay in separate beds, their strange silver blood slowly returning to normal color as Carter's treatments took effect. Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez sat in a chair between the two beds, officially assigned as their guard but finding the duty less threatening than he had expected. The princesses spent most of their time sleeping, and when they were awake, they seemed more interested in learning about their surroundings than causing trouble. "Your ship is smaller than I expected," Lyra said to Rodriguez during one of her waking periods. Her English was improving rapidly, though she still struggled with some words. "Smaller than what?" "Than the ships in our father's fleet. Zephyrian vessels are built for intimidation as much as function. This feels more practical." Nova opened her eyes at the sound of her sister's voice. The twins seemed to have an unusual connection, often waking at the same time or finishing each other's thoughts. Rodriguez had noticed that when one was in pain, the other would wince as well. "Are we prisoners?" Nova asked. Rodriguez hesitated. Morrison had told him to treat them as patients, but Earth Command would certainly want to question them eventually. "Right now you're guests," he said carefully. "Captain Morrison is still deciding what to do with you." "He saved our lives," Lyra said. "That is not something we expected from humans." "Why not?" The sisters exchanged one of their frequent meaningful looks, Nova answered. "Because we have been at war for 5 years. In war, enemies do not usually show mercy." Dr. Carter entered the medical bay carrying a tray of food. She had been working to figure out what the Zephyrians could safely eat from the ship's supplies. "How are you feeling today?" "Stronger," Lyra said, struggling to sit up. "Thank you for caring for us, Doctor." Carter set the tray down and checked her readings on both patients. "Your bone density is remarkable. What should have been weeks of healing is happening in days. And your neural implants seem to be helping with the recovery process." "The implants are part of our royal training," Nova explained. They enhance our natural abilities and connect us to the palace systems. Or they did when the palace still existed. What kind of abilities? The twins looked at each other again. Lyra spoke carefully. We can process information faster than normal Zephyrians. We can understand and speak languages more easily. And we have limited telepathic connections with others who have similar implants. Is that how you two seem to communicate without speaking? Yes, we are twins, so our connection is stronger than most. Carter made notes on her tablet. Fascinating. Would you be willing to let me study the implants? I promise not to damage them. Before the sisters could answer, Captain Morrison entered the medical bay. Rodriguez immediately stood at attention, but Morrison waved him back to his seat. How are our guests feeling? Much better, Nova said. We owe you a debt, Captain Morrison. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should do when they find someone hurt and trapped. Lyra studied Morrison's face. You are different from what our father taught us about humans. He said you were savage creatures who destroyed everything you touched. Morrison pulled up another chair. And what do you think now? I think our father was wrong about many things, Lyra said quietly. Morrison nodded toward Dr. Carter. The doctor tells me you've been very cooperative. You've answered her questions about Zephyrian biology and even helped her understand some of the medical equipment we salvaged. It seemed the right thing to do, Nova said. You saved our lives. The least we can do is help you understand our technology. Speaking of technology, Morrison said, I've been talking with our chief engineer. Amy Walsh has some questions about Zephyrian power systems. Would you be willing to speak with her? The twins looked surprised. Lyra spoke first. You would trust us with information about your ship? You're already aboard the ship. If you wanted to harm us, you've had plenty of opportunities. Our father would never have trusted former enemies with such information. Morrison leaned forward slightly. I'm not your father. Something in his tone seemed to reassure the princesses. Nova nodded slowly. We will help if we can. Perhaps we can learn from each other. Over the following days, the twins began working with different members of the crew. Nova spent hours with Chief Engineer Amy Walsh in the engine room explaining how Zephyrian quantum reactors worked and suggesting improvements to human designs. Her knowledge of energy systems was incredibly advanced, and Walsh was amazed by some of the solutions she proposed. Meanwhile, Lyra worked with communications. Officer Danny Kim to decode intercepted Zephyrian transmissions. Her understanding of military communication protocols helped the humans learn more about remaining enemy forces and their plans. This is incredible, Kim said as Lyra helped him break a particularly complex code. This transmission is from General Corix. He's gathering the remaining fleet commanders for some kind of final strike. Lyra's expression darkened. Corix was one of our father's most loyal generals. He always hated Nova and me for questioning the war. What kind of final strike? Knowing Corix, he will want to destroy as many human worlds as possible before his forces are defeated. He cares more about Zephyrian honor than Zephyrian lives. Kim forwarded this information to Morrison, who realized they might have stumbled onto something important. The twins weren't just providing technical assistance, they were giving the humans crucial intelligence about remaining threats, but not everyone aboard the Defiant was comfortable with the arrangement. During a senior staff meeting, Lieutenant Commander Sue Taylor expressed her concerns. I understand they've been helpful, she said, but they're still members of the royal family that started this war. How do we know this isn't some kind of elaborate trick? Because they were left to die by their own people, Morrison replied. If this was a trick, why would they risk their lives for it? Maybe the abandonment was part of the plan. Make us feel sorry for them so we'd trust them. Dr. Carter shook her head. I've examined them thoroughly. Their injuries were real, and they were genuinely close to death when we found them. This isn't an act. Besides, added Amy Walsh from engineering, Nova has shown me things about quantum mechanics that our best scientists don't understand. If she was trying to sabotage us, she's doing a terrible job of it. Taylor remained skeptical but didn't argue further. Morrison could see that the crew was divided, with some viewing the twins as valuable allies and others seeing them as potential threats. The situation became more complicated when Earth Command finally responded to Morrison's report about finding the princesses. The message was brief and direct: return to Sol System immediately with the prisoners for debriefing and trial. Morrison stared at the communication for a long time. He thought about the twins who had been abandoned by their own people and were now slowly learning to trust humans. He thought about the valuable information and assistance they had provided. And he thought about what would happen to them if he turned them over to Earth Command. "Sir?" Rodriguez asked. "What are your orders?" Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Send a reply to Earth Command. Tell them we're extending our patrol to investigate remaining Zephyrian forces. We'll return when the sector is secure. Sir, they specifically ordered us to return immediately. Morrison looked toward the medical bay where the twins were probably working with his crew, sharing knowledge and building the first real friendship between their species. "I know what they ordered," he said quietly. "But sometimes doing the right thing means disobeying orders." Captain Morrison knew he was making a dangerous choice when he ordered the Defiant to change course away from Earth. The twins had become more than just rescued survivors. They were proving valuable allies and, surprisingly, friends to many of his crew. But defying direct orders from Earth Command would have serious consequences. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez said quietly as they stood on the bridge, "half the crew thinks you're doing the right thing. The other half thinks we're all going to end up in military prison." Morrison watched the stars shift on the main screen as they headed toward the outer colonies. "What do you think, Ben?" "I think those two have been through enough without us." Handing them over to be interrogated and probably executed. In the weeks since their rescue, Lyra and Nova had become integrated into the ship's daily operations. They no longer stayed in the medical bay but had been given quarters near the crew sections. They ate meals with the humans, worked alongside them, and had even started participating in the evening card games that were popular among the enlisted personnel. "Contact from Earth Command coming in," announced Danny Kim from his communications station. "Put it on screen." Admiral Robert Chun appeared on the display, his expression stern. "Captain Morrison, you were ordered to return to Sol System with your prisoners. Instead, you've been heading in the opposite direction for 3 weeks. Explain yourself." Morrison straightened. "Admiral, the individuals we rescued are providing valuable intelligence about remaining Zephyrian forces. I believe extending our patrol will yield better results than returning immediately. Those individuals are war criminals, Captain. They need to face justice for their empire's actions. With respect, sir, they opposed the war from the beginning. Their own people considered them traitors for trying to prevent the conflict. That's not your decision to make. You have 48 hours to reverse course and head home, or I'll send ships to bring you back." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Morrison knew that Admiral Chun would follow through on his threat. Earth Command had plenty of ships that could overtake the Defiant. "Sir," Amy Walsh called from the engineering station, "we have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up? Multiple ships heading this way. They're not human." Morrison's stomach dropped. "Zephyrian?" "Yes, sir." "At least 6 vessels moving fast. They'll intercept us in about 4 hours. Can we outrun them?" Walsh shook her head. "Not with their speed. And sir, one of those ships is reading as a heavy cruiser. We can't fight that alone." Morrison was about to order evasive maneuvers when Lyra and Nova entered the bridge. They had heard the alarm and came to help. Both twins looked at the sensor readings and their faces went pale. "That's the Vengeance," Lyra said, pointing to the largest ship signature, General Corix's flagship. "He found us," Nova added grimly. "Somehow he tracked us." Morrison turned to them. "How?" "The neural implants," Lyra realized. "They have quantum signatures that can be detected over long distances if you know what to look for. Corix must have scanning equipment specifically designed to find us. Can we remove the implants?" Dr. Carter, who had also arrived on the bridge, shook her head. "They're too integrated with their nervous systems. Removing them would likely kill them." Morrison studied the tactical display. 6 Zephyrian ships against 1 human patrol vessel were impossible odds. But running would only delay the inevitable. Corix would keep hunting them until he found them. "What does Corix want?" Morrison asked the twins. "To capture us and restore what he sees as Zephyrian honor," Nova said. "In his mind, allowing us to live free with humans is the ultimate insult to our people. He'll also want to recapture the technology and information we've shared with you," Lyra added. "Corix sees cooperation with humans as the worst kind of betrayal." Morrison made his decision. "Battle stations. All crew to combat positions." As the crew hurried to prepare for fight, the twins remained on the bridge. Morrison noticed they were holding hands, their neural implants glowing slightly brighter than usual. "You should go to a secure area," he told them. "No," Lyra said firmly. "This fight is because of us. We won't hide while others risk their lives." "Besides," Nova added, "we know Corix's tactics better than anyone. We can help." The Zephyrian ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a coordinated formation, immediately surrounding the Defiant. Morrison had to admit their positioning was perfect. There was no escape route. "Incoming transmission," Kim announced. "Put it through." General Corix appeared on screen, his scarred face twisted with anger. He was typical of the older Zephyrian military leaders, harsh features, cold eyes, and an expression of absolute certainty in his own righteousness. "Human vessel, you carry stolen property of the Zephyrian Empire? Surrender the traitor princesses and you will be allowed to leave unharmed." Morrison stepped forward. "General Corix, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. The individuals you're referring to are under our protection as political refugees." Corix's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Refugees? They are criminals who betrayed their own species. Return them immediately or face the consequences." "I'm afraid I can't do that." "Then you choose death for your entire crew." "Very well." The transmission cut off, and immediately the Zephyrian ships began moving into attack positions. Morrison turned to his crew, knowing they were about to face overwhelming odds. "Nova," he said, "what can you tell us about their weapon systems?" "The smaller ships have plasma cannons with limited range," she said quickly. "But the Vengeance has quantum torpedo launchers that can punch through almost any shield. Amy, can we boost our defensive systems?" Walsh was already working at her station. "If I reroute power from life support and non-essential systems, I can give us maybe 30% more shield strength." "Do it, Lyra. How does Corix usually attack?" "He likes to use the smaller ships to hurt his target while the cruiser lines up for a killing shot," Lyra said. "But he's proud and predictable. If we can make him angry, he might make mistakes." The first attack came from 2 of the smaller ships, their plasma cannons lighting up space around the Defiant. Morrison felt the ship shudder as the shots impacted their shields. "Return fire," he ordered. The Defiant's weapons weren't as powerful as the Zephyrian plasma cannons, but human targeting systems were more accurate. Their first volley disabled one of the attacking ships, sending it spinning away from the battle. "Nice shooting," Morrison said to his weapons officer. "Can we do that 5 more times?" Before anyone could answer, the Vengeance opened fire with its main guns. The quantum torpedoes slammed into the Defiant shields with tremendous force, dropping their protection by half in a single attack. "Shields at 50%, Walsh reported. "We can't take many more hits like that." Morrison looked at the tactical display, trying to find some advantage they could use. The Zephyrian ships were faster and more heavily armed, but human ships were more maneuverable. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We're going to move fast and try to stay behind their bigger ships where they can't target us effectively." The next few minutes were a deadly dance among the stars. The Defiant darted between the larger Zephyrian vessels, using their bulk as cover while striking at the smaller ships. They managed to damage 2 more attackers, but their own shields were nearly gone. "Captain," Nova said suddenly, "Corix is positioning for another torpedo attack. But if we can time it right, we might be able to turn his own weapons against him." "What do you mean?" The quantum torpedoes have to charge for several seconds before firing. If we can get one of his smaller ships between us and the Vengeance at exactly the right moment, Morrison understood immediately. It was a desperate plan, but desperate was all they had left. Amy, I need everything you can give me from the engines. We're going to thread a very small needle. As the Vengeance began charging its main weapons, Morrison pushed the Defiant into a high-speed dive toward one of the smaller Zephyrian ships. At the last second, he pulled up sharply, putting the enemy vessel directly between them and Corix's flagship just as the general fired his torpedoes. The quantum torpedoes, unable to change course once launched, slammed into Corix's own ship, instead of their intended target. The smaller vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Direct hit on friendly fire? Danny Kim reported with satisfaction, but their celebration was short-lived. They had eliminated 3 of the 6 ships, but the remaining vessels, including the damaged Vengeance, were still more than a match for the lone human patrol ship. Sir, Rodriguez said quietly, we've bought some time, but we can't win this. Fight. Morrison looked at the twins, who were still standing beside him on the bridge. They had risked everything to help humanity, and now they were all going to die because he had chosen to protect them rather than hand them over to Earth Command. But as he prepared to give the order for one final attack, new contacts appeared. On the sensor display, 3 ships moving fast toward the battle. Captain, Kim said with excitement in his voice, we're being hailed by the incoming vessels. They're human ships, sir. Cavalry's arrived. The 3 human ships that arrived weren't military vessels from Earth Command. Captain Morrison recognized them as independent traders and colony ships, the kind that operated in the frontier regions beyond official government control. Their intervention had saved the Defiant, but it also meant Morrison's disobedience was now known throughout the outer colonies. Captain Morrison, came the voice over the communications channel. This is Captain Helen Brooks of the independent vessel Liberty. We picked up your distress signal and figured you could use some help. Much appreciated, Captain Brooks. What's your status? We've got the remaining Zephyrian ships running for the edge of the system. That General Corix fellow didn't seem interested in fighting fair odds. Morrison felt relief wash over him, but he knew their problems were far from over. The twins stood beside him on the bridge, watching the sensor display as the enemy ships retreated. Both looked exhausted from the stress of the battle. Where are you heading, Captain? Brooks asked over the comm. Morrison hesitated. With Earth. Command hunting them and Zephyrian forces trying to recapture the twins. There were few safe places left. We're not sure yet. Might I suggest Haven Station? It's 3 days from here, and Administrator Carl Hughes runs a fair operation. Lot of folks there who understand what it's like to be caught between governments that don't much care about individual lives. Morrison had heard of Haven Station. Built inside a large asteroid in the Kepler system, it served as a trading post and refuge for people who didn't fit neatly into either human or alien political systems. It wasn't officially recognized by Earth, but it wasn't actively opposed either. Sounds like our best option, Morrison decided. Thank you for the assistance, Captain Brooks. Any time. We independent types have to stick together. 3 days. Later, the Defiant approached Haven Station. Morrison was impressed despite himself. The installation was much larger than he had expected, with docking bays for dozens of ships and what looked like residential areas built into the asteroid's interior. Ships of various designs and origins moved in and out of the station in a steady flow of commerce. Request permission to dock, Danny Kim transmitted to the station. The reply came back quickly, but the tone was less welcoming than Morrison had hoped. Defiant, this is Haven Control. Administrator Hughes wants to speak with you before we grant docking permission. A few minutes later, Carl Hughes appeared on their main screen. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from years of dealing with difficult situations. His expression was serious as he studied Morrison and the bridge crew. Captain Morrison, I know who you are, and I know who you're carrying. Word travels fast out here, and there are a lot of people asking questions about those Zephyrian princesses. They're under our protection, Morrison said firmly. I'm sure they are. But protection from what, and protection for how long? My station has to maintain neutrality to survive. I can't afford to make enemies of Earth Command or the remaining Zephyrian forces. Before Morrison could respond, Nova stepped forward into view of the communication screen. Her appearance seemed to surprise Hughes, who had probably never seen a Zephyrian royal up close. "Administrator Hughes," she said in her careful English, "I understand your concerns, but we are not asking for a permanent sanctuary. We only need time to decide our future." Hughes studied her face for a moment. "You're one of the princesses? I am Nova. This is my sister Lyra." Lyra moved into view as well. "We do not wish to bring trouble to your station. If our presence would endanger your people, we will find another place." Hughes was quiet for several seconds, clearly weighing his options. Finally he spoke. "Dock at Bay 7, but understand that if trouble comes looking for you, I can't promise. The station will be able to help." "Understood," Morrison said. Haven Station's interior was unlike anything Morrison had seen before. The main corridors were carved directly from the asteroid's rock, but they were lined with shops, restaurants, and businesses run by people from dozens of different worlds. Humans worked alongside former Zephyrian slaves who had been freed during the war, as well as members of other species that Morrison didn't recognize. The twins walked through the station with obvious amazement. They had spent their entire lives in the formal, controlled environment of the Imperial Palace. The casual mixing of different species and the bustling commerce of Haven Station was completely foreign to their experience. "It's like a city," Lyra said, watching children from 3 different species playing together in a small park area. "A city where everyone is welcome," Nova added. Noticing how no one seemed to pay much attention to their unusual appearance, Administrator Hughes met them at the station's central hub, accompanied by a woman Morrison recognized as Captain Brooks. The area was designed as a meeting place, with seating areas and information displays showing station news and regulations. "Welcome to Haven Station," Hughes said. "I'll be honest with you, your arrival has caused quite a stir. We've got people here who suffered under Zephyrian rule, and they're not happy about hosting members of the royal family." "We understand," Lyra said quietly. "We know our people caused great suffering." But," Hughes continued, "we've also got people here who believe in second chances and the right of individuals to choose their own path. Captain Brooks has been telling folks about how you helped fight against that General Corix." Brooks nodded. "Word is you could have betrayed the human ship to save yourselves, but instead you helped them fight your own people." "They are not our people anymore," Nova said with surprising firmness. "Our people abandoned us to die. Captain Morrison and his crew saved our lives and treated us with kindness we did not deserve." Hughes led them to a quieter area where they could talk privately. "The thing is, we've got a problem here that maybe you could help with. Our main power system has been acting up for weeks, and none of our engineers can figure out what's wrong." "It's getting dangerous," Morrison looked at the twins. "What kind of power system?" "Fusion reactors, but they're modified with some Zephyrian technology we salvaged from abandoned ships. The quantum regulators keep fluctuating, and if they fail completely, the whole station could be destroyed." Nova and Lyra exchanged one of their meaningful looks. Nova spoke first. "We might be able to help. Our training included advanced energy systems management. But," Lyra added, "we would need to see the system first to understand what's happening." Hughes considered this. "If you can fix our power problem, it would go a long way toward convincing people that you're here to help, rather than cause trouble." They were taken to Haven Station's engineering section, deep in the heart of the asteroid. The fusion reactors were impressive pieces of human technology, but Morrison could see where Zephyrian components had been integrated into the system. The modifications looked dangerous to his untrained eye. Amy Walsh, who had come along from the Defiant, whistled softly as she examined the setup. "This is incredibly complex. I can see why you're having problems. The human and Zephyrian systems aren't designed to work together like this." Nova was already studying the quantum regulators with intense concentration. Her neural implants glowed brighter as she processed the information. "The problem is in the resonance frequency," she said after a few minutes. The Zephyrian components are trying to sync with quantum fields that don't exist in human space. Can it be fixed? Hughes asked. Lyra had been examining another part of the system. Yes, but it will require precise calibration. If we make a mistake, the reactors could overload. How long would it take? The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. 6 hours, Nova said finally. But we'll need to work together, and we'll need some of your human engineers to help with the parts we can't reach. Hughes made his decision. Do it! The next 6 hours were tense as Nova and Lyra worked with Walsh and the station's engineering team to recalibrate the fusion reactors. Morrison watched from the observation area as the twins demonstrated knowledge that impressed even the most experienced engineers. They moved through the complex system with confidence, making adjustments that seemed impossible to calculate without advanced computer systems. Their neural implants are like having supercomputers in their heads, Walsh commented as she watched. Nova solve a quantum mechanics problem in seconds. Is that normal for Zephyrians? No, just for the royal family. It's part of their genetic modification program. As the work progressed, word spread throughout the station about what the twins were doing. People began gathering in the engineering section to watch, including some who had been openly hostile to their presence earlier. If they can fix this, Hughes said to Morrison, it'll save thousands of lives. Those reactors have been a disaster, waiting to happen. Finally, Nova made the last adjustment to the quantum regulators. The entire system hummed smoothly for the first time in weeks, with all the readings showing perfect synchronization between the human and Zephyrian components. The engineering team erupted in cheers, and several people who had been watching began. The news that the alien princesses had saved Haven Station spread quickly through the outer colonies. For the first time since the war began, people were talking about Zephyrians who helped humans instead of enslaving them. The twins found themselves in an unusual position. They were becoming symbols of hope for a better future between the species. Administrator Hughes called a station-wide meeting 3 days after the reactor repair. The main assembly hall was packed with people from dozens of worlds, all wanting to see the former royal family members who had chosen cooperation over conquest. Morrison stood with the twins near the front of the room, still serving as their unofficial protector. Citizens of Haven Station, Hughes began, we face an important decision. Princess Lyra and Princess Nova have requested political asylum and citizenship in our independent confederation. This decision will affect all of us. The crowd murmured with mixed reactions. Some people nodded approvingly, while others looked uncertain or hostile. Morrison could see the division clearly. Those who had worked with the twins supported them, while those who only knew them by reputation remained suspicious. A woman in the front row stood up. Morrison recognized her as Sarah Kim, a former slave who had escaped from a Zephyrian mining colony. How do we know this isn't a trick? She demanded. Their father enslaved my entire family. My children died in Zephyrian work camps. The hall fell silent as Sarah's words hit home. Many people in the audience had similar stories of loss and suffering under the Empire. Lyra and Nova stood quietly, accepting the anger they knew they deserved. Finally, Lyra stepped forward. You are right to distrust us, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. Our father and our empire caused terrible suffering. We cannot undo the past or bring back the people who died. Nova joined her sister. But we can try to build a better future. We opposed the war from the beginning. We were declared traitors by our own people for refusing to support the conquest of human worlds. Words are easy, Sarah replied. Actions matter more. Then judge us by our actions, Lyra said. We could have betrayed Captain Morrison's ship to General Corix and saved our own lives. Instead, we helped fight against our former people. We could have used our knowledge to harm this station. Instead, we used it to save thousands of lives. A man near the back of the hall stood up. Morrison recognized him as Chief Engineer Pete Collins from one of the colony ships. I worked with them on the reactor repair, he said. They risked their own lives to prevent an explosion. That's not something you fake. More people began speaking. Up, some in support and others in opposition. The debate continued for over an hour as the community struggled to decide what to do with the former princesses. Finally, Hughes called for order. "This is bigger than just our station," he said. "If we grant them citizenship, it will send a message throughout the galaxy that former enemies can become allies. But it will also make us a target for both Earth Command and the remaining Zephyrian forces." As if summoned by his words, an urgent alarm began sounding throughout the station. Danny Kim, who had been monitoring communications from the Defiant, quickly contacted Hughes. "Sir, we have multiple ships approaching the system. It's General Corix again, and this time he brought a lot more friends." The assembly hall erupted in worried voices as people realized they were about to come under attack. Hughes quickly took control of the situation. "All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. Defense teams to your positions." Morrison turned. "To the twins, you should get to safety." "No," Nova said firmly. "This attack is because of us. We will not hide while others fight. We can help coordinate the defense," Lyra added. "We know how Corix thinks and fights." The next few hours tested everything Haven Station had built over the years. Corix had brought 8 ships this time, including 2 heavy cruisers and a support fleet. The station's defenses were impressive for an independent colony, but they were badly outnumbered. The battle began with Corix demanding the surrender of the traitor princesses in exchange for sparing the station. When Hughes refused, the Zephyrian fleet opened fire on the defensive platforms surrounding the asteroid. Morrison found himself in the station's command center alongside Hughes and the twins. The display showed the progress of the battle, and it was clear that Haven Station was fighting for its survival. "Their attack pattern is predictable," Lyra observed, studying the tactical display. "Corix is using the same formation he always favored, heavy ships in the center with lighter vessels providing cover. Can we use that against him?" Hughes asked. Nova was already working on something. "If we can overload one of their heavy cruisers, it might cause a chain reaction that damages the others." "How?" "The quantum torpedoes they use are powerful but unstable. If we can hit their weapon storage at exactly the right moment during a firing sequence, the explosion will be much larger than normal." Morrison understood what she was suggesting. "You want to time our counterattack to hit them just as they're preparing to fire at us." "Yes, but the timing has to be perfect. A few seconds too early or too late and it won't work." The opportunity came 20 minutes later when one of the Zephyrian cruisers moved into position for a major attack on the station's main defensive array. Nova watched the energy readings from the enemy ship with intense concentration. "Now," she said suddenly. Hughes gave the order, and Haven Station's most powerful weapon fired at the precise moment Nova had calculated. The shot struck the Zephyrian cruiser just as its torpedo launchers were charging, causing a massive explosion that severely damaged 2 other enemy ships, but the victory came at a cost. The explosion also damaged Haven Station's primary shields, leaving them vulnerable to the remaining enemy ships. Corix, enraged by the loss of his vessels, ordered a direct assault on the station itself. "He's going to try to board us," Morrison realized, watching the enemy ships move closer. "No," Nova said quietly. "He's going to try to destroy the entire station. Corix would rather see us dead than living free." She was right. The Zephyrian general positioned his remaining ships for a final, devastating attack that would crack the asteroid and kill everyone inside. It was a desperate move that would likely destroy his own forces as well. But Corix cared more about Zephyrian honor than survival. As the enemy ships prepared for their final attack, Lyra made a decision that surprised everyone. She walked to the communication console and opened a channel to Corix's flagship. "General Corix," she said as her image appeared on screens throughout both fleets, "I am Princess Lyra, daughter of Emperor Valdris." Corix's scarred face appeared on the main display, twisted with rage. "Traitor princess! You bring shame to our entire race." "I bring hope," Lyra replied calmly. "Look around you, General. Our empire is gone, our people are scattered. But here, humans and Zephyrians work together as equals. This is the future our species needs. The future is conquest or death. There is no other way for Zephyrians. Then you choose death, Nova? Said, joining her sister at the communication console. But we choose life. We choose cooperation. We choose to build something better than our father's empire. Korix raised his weapon toward the camera. Then die as traitors. But before he could fire, his own officers stopped him. Morrison watched in amazement as several Zephyrian crew members on the enemy ships began laying down their weapons. The twins' words were being broadcast throughout the fleet, and not all of Korix's followers were willing to die for his version of honor. The rebellion spread quickly through the Zephyrian ships. Within minutes, half of Korix's fleet had surrendered, and the general found himself facing a mutiny on his own flagship. The remaining loyal ships fled the system, leaving Korix alone and defeated. 3 months later, Haven Station had become the center of a growing movement for peace between humans and Zephyrians. The twins, now official citizens of the independent colonies, worked as ambassadors helping other Zephyrian refugees find new homes and new purposes. Morrison, who had been officially pardoned by Earth Command after his actions helped end the war, often visited the station during his patrols. He found the twins in their new home, a simple apartment overlooking the station's central park where children from many worlds played together. "Any regrets about giving up your royal titles?" he asked during one visit. Lyra smiled as she watched. A young human girl teaching a group of Zephyrian children how to play a human game. "We were never really princesses," she said. "We were just prisoners in golden cages," Nova nodded in agreement. "Here we are free to choose our own path and help others do the same." Outside their window, ships from dozens of worlds came and went. From Haven Station, carrying trade goods and passengers between the growing network of independent colonies. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was a future built on hope instead of fear.